My name is Earl Robinson. I obviously live in Leicester. I am a Kingstonian. I say Kingstonian as distinct from a Jamaican only because most Jamaicans will say they come from every parish in Jamaica except Kingston. So I have no problem with that. And that tells you a great deal about my attitude towards life.
Okay, and when did you get into Leicester?
Leicester. I actually came to Leicester in 1958 when I actually came here. And the story behind me coming to Leicester is that I used to work at the local newspaper in Jamaica, in Kingston, the Gleaner. And there was a riot, the Notting Hill riot in London, and 5 of us in Jamaica decided to come to London to see the riot. We didn't see the riot come, but I came to Leicester because my brother at the time also lived in Leicester, and my aunt, who is still here, also lived in Leicester.
So when did you start partying in Leicester?
Well, ever since I came, because as a Kingstonian, which is quite rightly, we always at the party. So really, all the dances that was organized by Mr. Blues and the various sound system was around, 1 or 2 was around, was based in Leicester. So the hall at the, which is now the fire station, and St. George's Hall, that was where most of the functions were held at that time.
Where's the St. George's Hall? Is that one?
St. George's Hall is now where the police station is, in there, right in front of the Leicester Mercury. St. George's Hall, which is St. George's Church, which is that now I think is a Greek Orthodox church now. There's a hall there, and the police is now taking over that building and building some brand new fancy building there. And the pub across the road was where most of the events was being held at the time.
Now, can you explain the differences between those ones that were happening within those clubs and what Mr. Blues was doing? Was Mr. Blues more in the home?
No, Mr. Blues was two-way. Mr. Blues would have been doing what we call blues parties in homes, but also there also would be, and not only Mr. Blues, there's other sound systems, I can't remember the names of them, but also performing at the clubs around. So whether it's the Lancaster Hall, which is the fire station, so when we have somebody like Jimmy Cliff, or we have somebody like Prince Buster coming up to Leicester, you have a sound system because these artists at the time would not perform all night without sound systems. They would, but they're not going to play all night. So when Jimmy Cliff came, when Prince Buster came, and all those guys came from Jamaica at the time, they perform, but at the same time you also have the sound system in addition to it, because we're talking about dances that go till from 11 o'clock till 3 o'clock in the morning, you know, so really that was the thing at the time.
Was that in the 60s?
I would say that would be early 60s, very early 60s, yes, because I remember Prince Buster coming to, which is now Campbell Street Post Office, and there's a nightclub up there at the time, and Prince Buster performed until 3:30 in the morning, that type of stuff, you know.
Do you know who was promoting them? What was it like?
Well, those days, you know, you realize that Caribbean people at the time didn't go to pubs, so they have to have entertainment. So whether it's a house party or a dance, so most promoters would just try to do something to give people something to come out of the house about, right? And that was really what it's about. It's not so much about trying to make money. It's just to give people some entertainment. So that was the purpose behind those things. So those guys who had sound systems, Mr. Blues in particular, and 1 or 2 more, I can't remember the names of them. I know Gussie had one, which is Mr. Blues, Gussie Johnson. Then I think Lee Morris was involved and Thomas was involved. They used to help organize those things. So all we did assisted in trying to get the people over and then perform. So the house parties will go until 2:30, sometimes very late, 3 o'clock in the morning, even 5 o'clock in the morning, just maybe going for the whole weekend, you know, end of the day. People had to find time to enjoy themselves.
So you said you assisted on bringing people over?
Well, I wouldn't say assist them. We had some knack about trying to make contact because some people knew who some of us were and then they make some contact. We didn't actually bring anybody from Jamaica at the time. They mainly came from London. Winston Groove in particular was performing from London, and people like Prince Buster. So because at the time Jamaica was not an independent country, the people could come and go as they like. So that was what was happening.
What was the differences on how you publicised those events back then?
The difference is word of mouth. You know people, you make your call. Very times we did flyers. I remember distinctly, and I think maybe the flyer is still around, when we had some event at Humberston College. This was one of Jamaica Independence Dance. And we did find ways to print things, but those days you had to cost money to print a leaflet, 5 shillings or 10 shillings. I think we've got those leaflets around. And because of Jamaica, just before Jamaica Independence came along, most of those things was being done by handwritten stuff and photocopying stuff and that type of stuff to get there. But at the time, the people in Leicester was much more coordinated. People knew people. And because of the links were there for forming people like credit unions and that type of stuff, it meant that people knew people that you could call on them to go. So you expect those people to come to an event, whether it's a house party or an event. We do have some flyers in our archive of the independence dances we had, whether it's the Humberston College or it's that place now, the Rock, I think they call it the Rock, down at the roundabout in Belgrave Road. It's Rock and Roll, yes, we did that. So all those times, the Jamaica High Commission would support, the High Commission would come to an event in Leicester. So if he comes up to Leicester, you organize something after his presentation and that type of stuff. So really, it's people trying to find ways to entertain themselves and also making link with their home country.
No, you're not telling us much about your part in here.
Well, I don't think I've got any significant part in it. I'm just part of a group of people who assisted in it. Because at the time, I think at that time, we were much more supportive of each other. Because whether you come from Jamaica or Antigua or Barbados, you are in a country that is, at the time, very racist and probably still is to some extent. And therefore, you have to be part of that grouping. So you're meeting people from other Caribbean countries. In fact, to be honest with you, I've never heard of Barbuda before. I thought about Barbados, but I've never heard of Barbuda. So you're learning about those persons who come from those countries at the time in Leicester.
And when did you start bringing the music over? Because that's one thing I hear from a lot of people.
Well, because you're here, you're going to get people to send things for you. And because you don't go and collect and bring it. At the time, there was some people in London used to bring over records and then try and pass it around to the community. So mainly Londoners who would be doing that. So at the time, people was importing records. And even you think about before people like Chris Blackwell arrive here and start making records in the UK, most of the Jamaican records, and don't forget some of the Jamaican records at the time was very limited. It was mainly the American music, which are the blues and soul, that was available at the time. And Jamaica's music industry wasn't really at the time at the top of the game until My Boy Lollipop came about, that type of stuff. And then, so it's really the homegrown people, whereas the people live in the UK, and then you get American records at the time. And then eventually, because even when the show came to the theatre, we got the one, the one in front of the curve, what's it called? Yeah, where at the time it was a cinema. And then they had, I think it was 1967, I can't show the date, but 67, when they had the Motown Review. So people like Stevie Wonder, Dan Ross, and the Supreme, all that lot came over there. And when they finished from that, they went across the Ronda record shop and then partied until 2:30 in the morning. So that was what was the period at the time.
Explain a night for me, in your younger days.
I wouldn't know about the younger days. I'm still very young. That's it. But explaining is very difficult because and the experience we had is that many people didn't have cars and there was no late buses. So when you go to a function at 2:30 or 3 or 5, you got to walk at home, wherever you live. And those experiences still, particularly during the snow time, because you're leaving a function or a dance or wherever it is at whatever time if you're going home, and wherever you're going, you got to walk at home, whether with a woman or whether you pick up at night or whatever. So really, it was that type of period you have. And I'll never forget those times when I used to walk from say, downtown Leicester, which is Rwanda or wherever, to Catherine Street, walking home at 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning. Those times in the snow reflected on me.
And what about inside the dance floor? Because society was changing and everything was changing through that 60s and 70s. How did that feel to be around at that time?
Well, it's very difficult because life has changed, you moved on. I do know that when the Moat Youth Club started, a lot of Moat Youth Club, which is a building in Melbourne Road, a lot of things was happening there. And I think some of the bands used to practice inside there. So you could have a function in there later on, because at times it was owned by Leicestershire County Council. I think it was, or Leicester City Council, one of them. But at least you could actually have a youth club event, and some of them went until very late in the morning. At that time, you had no problem in getting functions at that time with people. So really, it's a varied time. As you get older, times have moved on. But at the end of the day, it's a question about going to a function, a dance, a blues dance, or going to a concert. That depends on who is there. You can have a mixture of both. So if you have Jimmy Cliff as an example, I'm thinking of Jimmy Cliff in particular, performing, at the end of the night, when he finished performing, or Laura Lakin was local at the time. When they finished performing, then the rest of it is just sound system until 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And that was the lifestyle for entertainment.
So what bands, like local bands, what have you seen come out through Leicester?
Well, I always think that, you know, you have Grow Nation came around. You had Show Waddy Waddy, who was around because Romeo was part of Show Waddy Waddy, drummer, and he used to practice very well at the Moat building in Melbourne Road, and that's why. So quite a few. There's a band I can't remember the name of them. I think the Flair Brothers. And if you think of the Flair Brothers, I think one of them still perform. He's now part of the. He's part of the Drifters. Is now part of that group, and it's really those type of guys who had there. Some of the younger ones who came later, and I can recall. Leicester City Council, when they were attempting to have a sort of a link with, I think it's Crayfield, and they asked us to take part in that event in Crayfield. And we took not only dance company, that was main interest in dance company, dance in terms of the grassroots dance company, and some of them that went to Crayfield to perform. And we organized, Steel Band was there, for instance, so we organized the whole trip. Because most times we used to take young people from Leicester to parts of Europe. In fact, we took some to Jamaica some years as well. So the idea was making that connection between, the link between the Caribbean and also the Leicester scene. So we took the party from Leicester, Steel Band, dance companies, performers, to Crayfield. The current mayor, city mayor, was then leader of whatever, help us organize it, and we put that together and take them to Crayfield. Because those days when they were trying to look at Europe, UK and Europe, a lot of exchange was taking part in Europe, so we had people going to Dordrecht, and people going to Germany and that type of stuff.
Was that, was it 60s?
Yes, it would be the 60s, yes. And there's a picture we've got of I can't remember the name of the group, but some young people who went to a project in Germany. And there's 5 countries in there, including Leicester young people: German, Luxembourg, French, I think from Poland, I'm not sure. And then the only group that didn't speak any other foreign language was the kids from Leicester, until some of them came back and started learning languages, because every other group spoke English whilst we were there from Luxembourg. And one particular woman I'm very keen about, when she came back from that trip, she decided to do Spanish and French, and is now a professor in Canada doing that.
Going back to the Leicester scene, what was your favourite club at that point?
Well, my favorite club in Leicester at the time was Bailey's nightclub. So when Bailey's was there, it was a sort of a dress-up job, and everybody going tables. And some of the big American groups used to perform there. The Drifters and all that lot came and performed there. So it was that time. So in terms of a nightclub going out at the time, Bailey's was giving us that type of at the one in Haymarket. Haymarket? Just around the, yeah. And so that, to me, that was a place to go to at the time, because there was no nightclub. Some people used to go to Il Ronda, and Il Ronda had some blues session, and I remember Champion Jack Dupree performed at the Il Ronda nightclub, as with some of the other, it was mainly blues coming into Leicester, going to those places. And I can recall Champion Jack Dupree performing at the Il Ronda. Not a bad audience, show wasn't very good, but then during the break he went to a club, like a bar around the corner. It was a completely different atmosphere because he was on a piano at the thing from being part of a band. So you get that kind of difference in terms of attitude towards what's going on.
So did you hear different music? As a community, you were putting on things quite capably, big events around the city in quite big clubs. I mean, they're not the mainstream clubs. But how did that kind of come about?
I think it was people just being creative, because if you can't buy your music and you can't, you do your own thing. Today it's a different ball game, but at the time people just come out and do their thing. Whether it's a sound system guys, usually, or somebody who is an entrepreneur decide to plan something and organize an event. Some of the organizations would have organized an event with a cricket club or a domino team or whatever, to organize those events. So if you have a domino tournament, as they have done, and teams come from Bedford and London and Nottingham, wherever they are, coming from there, at the end of the domino tournament, you have to have a party. You have to play music and drink and socialize, at least, you dance sometime, but that was it. Nowadays it's different, because I couldn't tell last year I went to one of those type of thing. I do when I go to Jamaica now, because it still exists. Jamaica have a different bars scene in Jamaica now, but I do go, when I go to Jamaica, I will go and see what's happening down there. But Leicester, I very rarely go to nights now.
And when did Luca come in, and the rendezvous was later?
70s. I think it was early 70s. So we've got documentation somewhere on that, but it was really the time when the city council felt that the Caribbean community needed some kind of a place. So they gave the building, Stafford House, to the Luca organization to set up some kind of a socialized bit there. That was quite nice. It's just sad when they decided to knock it down to put a curve up there, because it meant that community exists, but in a different capacity. But that was really what it was about. You can go there to have your best dominoes or table tennis or cricket or whatever, and your events there without any problem. So.
Sorry, was Rendezvous Luca then?
No, Rendezvous was beside Luca. Luca was Stafford House, which is where the curve is. So where the curve is now, Rendezvous and Luca was in that same area. Yeah. The Rendezvous was like a bit beside that, So really in the same. So that whole area of the city has been part of the legacy of the black community. But so when they closed Luca down just to build the curve, it was sad, because it meant you destroyed a lot of community activities, whether it's the function, the dances, because at that time, every time the West Indies cricket team came to Leicester at the time, that's where they came. So when they finished playing the cricket, that's where they used to come and socialize and mingle with people. And all those performers used to come in. It's a place people used to go inside there. Really, that was what it's about. But we've lost that kind of a facility now. We don't have that around anymore.
And what year did the ACC and the Highfields Community Centres come about?
Highfields Community Centre came about in this early 70s. I think they're doing about 40 years now, Highfields Community Centre, because Highfields Community Centre was built when, think about the local politics, because at the time Leicestershire County Council was involved with the city involvement, as distinct from Leicester City Council. And so there's a lot of link between, so where's the cricket club or the football clubs, it was the Leicestershire County Council was responsible for the city at that time.
Were you involved in bringing that back? Because that was made as a music place.
There was plans to have a music kind of equipment inside there. That maybe still is, but the steel band moved up there, and it was built as a sort of community facility for the Highfields area.
The big dances at the Highfields Community Centre and the ACC back in the day. Kind of how did those? Were you a part of those?
I'd moved away from at the time because a different grouping of younger people was coming inside there. But Highfields said, I was at Highfields Community Centre for some time ago, part of that initial city council staffing, shall we call it, at the time. And it was open as a community facility because it was built. And between the Moat boys' school across the road and the Moat girls' school, when they became defunct, then they decided to have a facility at the Highfields Community and build the brand new Moat college, basically, to merge those two schools. That's what they did. I'm sure that's what happened. Merging Moat boys, Moat girls, and build a Moat community college. So the county council at the time was making decisions about those kind of developments. And that's why sometimes you look at the Leicester Caribbean Cricket Club, they're based at Ethel Road, and Highfield Rangers Football Club is based at Glen Eagles Avenue, right? So all those development discussion was going on at the time by the county council and the city council.
What about Spectrum?
No, I wasn't part. I knew about Spectrum down in just where the Phoenix is, but I wasn't part of setting it up. There's another other group of people who was involved. I knew that because we had the Jamaica High Commission came there and did some opening ceremony. I think we got a picture of the High Commissioner there some time ago. But Spectrum was mainly made by a different group of mainly younger people who wanted that facility to move in the city.